I think the dental industry, like many industries, has been faced with just enormous changes. And the changes are things that cause a lot of ambiguity and a lot of concern for people. So many times they look at strategies, or look at what are we going to do from a strategic standpoint, recognizing that it's going to impact all the way through. The teams are the people who are going to implement whatever change is there. And so when you've got the strategies changing, you've got the climate changing, you've got the environment, the milieu changing, you are also dealing with what's happening to the people. And my experience has always been about people. Everything that I've done has been related to people. My driving goal, all of my professional career, has been seeing people be successful. That just floats my boat. And so with Dental City, I've had the great privilege of watching that unfold over years. I've watched John and Dave, the owners of this company, reinvent themselves multiple times, sometimes kicking and screaming, but always doing it, getting there, and expanding and caring about their people in the midst of it.
What's going on, everybody? I'm very, very excited to kick off this new podcast brought to you by Dental City called Beyond the Operatory. And I have to tell you that I have known of this Dental City team for a while. For many in the dental industry, they know Dental City very well because they order supplies from them on a monthly basis, sometimes on a weekly basis. And it's just a company that, in my humble opinion, I've been in dentistry for 21 plus years, is doing the right thing by those that they serve, right? We're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, just a high quality organization. But what I'm most excited about is that they came to me and were interested in taking what they do to the next level, right? They've been serving dental practices with their supplies for many, many years, but they've also recognized through their conversations and relationships with their practices that running a dental practice is more than buying the supplies that you need, right? Obviously, that's a big piece of it. But they have seen the opportunity to be able to partner with some individuals that they know and bring to you this new podcast in a way that can help you, like we said, beyond the operatory, right? Some things that are maybe outside of the clinical realm. So we thought we would get this thing kicked off with an individual that I think you're going to love. I have had some opportunities to just learn a little bit about her story. She's been doing some amazing things, and I would love for you to go back and listen to her bio at the beginning of this first episode. But I'm with Betsy Mitchell. And Betsy, it's such a pleasure to be with you. I'm excited to get this kicked off. I know the Dental City team was just ecstatic about having you share your insight, all your experience in helping teams over the years to get this podcast started.
Thank you so much, John. It's a privilege and it's fun. And working with Dental City has been just a joy. I've been with them on and off now for over 25 years, from when they started just as a very young company, just kind of getting going and building your business and changing their strategies and dealing with all of the magnitude of changes occurred for them. So it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, we are going to record several different episodes, right? I think you've actually put together 7 main topics. So we're going to have 7 different episodes, all around leadership and managing teams. Before we get into this first episode, I would love to have you share with everybody just a little bit about your experience to set the stage for why a dental practice should, take some of this insight that you're going to share of these next 7 episodes and put it to use.
Well, I think the dental industry, like many industries, has been faced with just enormous changes. And the changes are things that cause a lot of ambiguity and a lot of concern for people. So many times they look at strategies, or look at what are we going to do from a strategic standpoint, recognizing that it's going to impact all the way through. The teams are the people who are going to implement whatever change is there. And so when you've got the strategies changing, you've got the climate changing, you've got the environment, the milieu changing, you are also dealing with what's happening to the people. And my experience has always been about people. Everything that I've done has been related to people. My driving goal, all of my professional career, has been seeing people be successful. That just floats my boat. And so with Dental City, I've had the great privilege of watching that unfold over years. I've watched John and Dave, the owners of this company, reinvent themselves multiple times, sometimes kicking and screaming, but always doing it, getting there, and expanding and caring about their people in the midst of it. So when I've looked at any kind of a company, I worked with many companies over the years, including the Green Bay Packers, if this is part of my background. Um, the success of that company isn't just one thing, one purpose, one strategy. The success as a company is being able to pull all of the pieces together, helping the people in the company understand the why of a change, the what of a change, the how of a change, but the biggest piece is how does it affect me? What am I going to do? And so being able to be a part of kind of guiding and directing and advising in those areas, that's just been a great deal of fun.
We're in a very interesting place in dentistry for a lot of reasons. I feel like, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this as we get into each one of these episodes, but for the last maybe, I don't know, 4 to 5 years, dental practice owners, right? The dentist, which, as you know so well, Betsy, did not go to dental school in many cases and learn a lot of leadership or business skills.
Right.
There's been a lot of focus, which I get encouraged about over the last 4 to 5 years, where those practice owners, those dentists, have been taking more education and more leadership courses, right, on how to be a better business owner and how to lead and all of that. And I'm excited about the progress that we've made there. I can't wait for you to kind of share your insights on that. But I now feel like it's moving to the teams, right? I feel like there's a recognition that, like you mentioned, for a dental practice to be successful, it's going to require not just the practice owner and their leadership skills, but then also how are, they working with their entire team. And so this first episode is going to be built around that, right? Which is leadership and managing teams. And as we get into this, I would just like to, get your insight. Like you mentioned, 25 years with Dental City, so you have an understanding of like how a dental practice works. What are your thoughts on that as far as like a dental practice evolving and taking a lot of these leadership skills down to the rest of the team in addition to the practice owner?
It's an interesting question because when you talk about leadership, you really talk about leaders understanding and leading themselves first. And they're setting the example, they're setting the tone for what is going to happen and cascade down and through their teams. Um, when when leaders, as dentists and business owners, begin to look at what is the impact of my behavior, my attitude, my approach, what is the impact of that on my team, and then ask the question, what is the impact of my team on my clientele, on my patients that are walking in my door? They're having to be experiencing that from a broader perspective. In the past, people would come to a practice and they're coming because this dentist has a particular reputation or it's a wonderful place to go. Now, there's a difference from the clientele looking at what is that feeling when I walk in the door. That's affected by who is that first team member that I meet. That's affected by who is the next team member that I meet. What is the climate within there? And all of those pieces come into play. The dentists themselves, looking at that, looking from a broader scope, are having to pay attention to things that they might not have had to really pay that much attention to in the past. So, when you talk about the dentist getting a sense of how do I lead this, there's a learning curve for them, which they then need to mentor their other people, engage them in part of that learning, and have communication with them about what does that team member think that's important. It's a different kind of engagement. In the past, things were very much more top down, and the leader said, "Here's what we're going to do," and people just did it. Now it's an engagement that says not just top down, but it's a relationship between what are those folks who basically know their practice and know the people coming into the office much better than maybe that dentist himself does, and asking them, what do you see? How do you engage your team members both in inputs and in solutions and strategies? So you're talking about a different climate for leadership today. The dentist himself needs to understand, how do I usually lead? Is that the right way today? They need to be asking themselves questions. Is the framework that I've come from the one that works today? Because these frameworks has changed. Our employees has changed. Our team members have changed. Our clientele has changed. Our patients have changed. And our payers have changed. And so it's an interplay of all of those. It's much more complex than it used to be. And given that, there's an opportunity, a great opportunity actually, for dentists and dental practices to evolve and to become the leaders in their industries in a different way than they were before. We were much more in a reactive framework in the past, much more reactive to, here's the climate, this is what we need to do, here's what we should do. Today, we're in a much more proactive and need to be proactive. We need to be leading from a different direction, leading from a standpoint of what are the kinds of things that I can anticipate are going to be important to both my team members, because remember, we're talking about both employee retention. We're talking about what is the attitude of our employees to everybody that's coming in the office. We're talking about how do we deal with the kinds of things that might be different than what we had before. I mean, just take COVID for an example. That completely changed many things in all of the world. But in the area of face-to-face contact with people, how do people experience that? Those are the proactive kind of thinking that needs to happen today. That's different than what it was 15 years ago, or even 5.
So as I was prepping for this conversation with you, which I was really excited about, one of the things that kept coming up in my mind that I wanted to ask you is the comparison between a team in sports, like the Green Bay Packers,
Right.
which I feel like all of us look at sports and we associate sports with teams. We talk about teams in the dental practice.
Right.
But is this like, does it feel like this for it feels like in some regards, like we've always looked upon the individuals in the dental practice, like the hygienist, the dental assistant, the office manager, the practice owner, the dentist, as like individuals working together as a team. Whereas I feel like in sports, like we've always kind of looked at it as a team. How have you, with your experience in working with, for example, the Green Bay Packers and now looking at a team in the dental practice, what things are the same and what things are different?
Well, it's a great question from the standpoint of what things are the same. Um, the things that are the same is that you have to have an ultimate goal. In football, in sports, in whatever, your goal is we want to win championships.
Right.
And everybody needs to drive toward that goal. And they need to understand what is their role in achieving that goal. In the dental practices, the goal is whatever that dentist decides, but ultimately it will be the best care that they can possibly provide for their patients. So everybody needs to be working toward that same goal. Now, the hygienist has a different role in there. The reception people have a different role in there. The people that clean the offices have a role in. Everybody has some kind of a role in that. And what's key is that people understand, how does what I do aim us toward that goal? How does what I do, let me give you an example. We did a lot of strategic planning in the Green Bay Packers, and we were doing a lot of stuff about um, everybody understanding what was their role. Because in sports, you think of a team as like the players and the coaches, but there are all of these people that are part of that team. And an example would be when we think about asking someone, how do you contribute to winning championships? Well, if you were asking somebody from the facilities department um, how they contributed to winning championships, they would say, you know, I make sure that that locker room is spectacularly clean and everything is working so there are no distractions for our football players when they come in and they're focused on the game. That's my role. So if you start thinking in a dental practice, everyone can state, what is my role in our ultimate goal, which is at that point perhaps providing the best care possible in the best environment possible for the best experience that any client comes in. What's my role? My role might be to greet that person at the door, smile, and make sure that they feel welcome. That might be my role. My role might be the person cleaning my teeth to make sure that they understand all of the things that I need to make sure I tell them to keep them healthy and well. Or my role might be restoring whatever is wrong in that person's smile and having them walk out feeling like, wow, I love my smile. I love I'm feeling good.
I love that. So I'm glad you shared that. I wanted to start there because I wanted to kind of shape some context around your experience and working with the Packers. And I think it's exciting as we get into these different episodes and talk about leadership, that we bring that into this, because my hope is that for anybody in the dental practice that is listening to these episodes, they can start to visually see how they can look at their team. And I love how you shared that, where everybody has their own role and they're all focused towards one goal instead of the individual goals.
Right, right.
So, all right. So that being said, I wanted to start kind of with my first main theme that I wanted to have you talk about, which is building and retaining not just a team, but a high performing team. Maybe we go ahead and start there.
High performing teams are really based on trust. And the best performance that you're going to get out of somebody has something to do with how do they feel about the people that they're working with, the organization or practice they're working with, and the ultimate goal that's there. So we start with the notion that you trust that people come and they bring their best to the organization or to the company. The second part of high performing teams is about relationships. It's about understanding that people are free to ask questions, to make a contribution, that there is the basis of saying any idea is a good idea. And they don't, so trust is there that says, look, I have an idea, but if I don't trust that I can bring my idea forward and it be valued or heard, then I'm not gonna bring it forward. Well, when that happens, you're losing the ability to get the highest performance out of that person or the highest ability out of that person. So you take those two things, the relationship and you take trust, and then you add to it creating a milieu where you as a leader engage people and invite them to talk about what's working, what's not working, having the opportunity to, walk through the tough spots, having the opportunity to say, hey, I'm having a bad day and it's okay. Let's find a way to make it better. You know, looking at something beyond just we have a metric to meet and we're going to meet that metric. High performing teams are not based on meeting a metric. They're based on what does it take to get there. It's a different thought process. And I think sometimes we get caught up in, well, we need data. We need to know this is what happens. But data only speaks when you got people behind that creating that opportunity for excellence. Yeah. The other piece is having a culture of excellence that is unwaverable, if that's even a word, but an unrelenting sense of we set a goal for excellence. And excellence varies from day to day. I'm excellent sometimes when I get up in the morning and I feel terrific and everything's great. But I might not be the top of my game if I get up in the morning, I got a bad headache and I'm thinking, oh man, I think I'm getting a cold. So it's allowing for those differences and allowing for that to vary over time. Because with high performing teams, they're made up of people. People barrier. You have good days, you have bad days. You have times when you're really focused. You have times when maybe you're not quite so focused. You have times when you are just on fire with a great idea. You have times when you go, oh, we got to get through this. And it's allowing for all of that to be fluid. High performing teams are composed of regular people who see that they can do their best and who bring their best every day, whatever their best is that day. And having the opportunity for leaders to acknowledge that's possible and that's okay. And the other piece of it is acknowledgement from leadership of small wins. Not always the biggest metric, not always the biggest win, but the small wins along the way. There's a book that was out years ago called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. And, when you think about it, it isn't always the big stuff that impacts us. It's someone acknowledging, hey, you did a great job on that. And it might not have been the completion of an enormous project. It might have simply been you handed somebody sundae. It's looking at the whole picture. And in essence, John, we're all people. We all want to be acknowledged. We all want to be contributing. We all want to feel like we've done something that's, offering, uh, I don't know, something great, right? Or maybe it's just something small. But at the end of the day, when you're really looking at how do these teams operate differently than other teams, you're looking at those factors, the trust factor, a relationship factor, the acknowledgement of small wins, the ability for people to be human and contribute in whatever way, and the invitation from leaders for their contributions, good, bad, and in between. And so the contribution may be a critique on something, or it may be an acknowledgement of something, or it may be a praise of something, or it may be just a new crazy idea. All are on the table when you got a high-performing team.
So the next thing I wanted to have you talk about is motivating that team, reducing burnout. And the first question around that, Betsy, is whose responsibility in practice is it for these items? The motivation, but then more importantly, kind of managing that team burnout.
Starting with the responsibility question, everybody has a responsibility, number one, for themselves and to be watching themselves and how they are doing. Okay. And the leadership really has a responsibility to be paying attention to individuals, to the other people that are managing. So if you're in a sizable organization, it's not possible for one or two people to know what's all happening. So it's cascading through to make sure that people are paying attention to the people side of the business. So your managers, the people that are working all the way through, it's a cascading down. But it's also a laddering up of individuals who are saying, gosh, I noticed that my partner here is not themselves today. I'm wondering what's going on. It's notice. It's taking personal responsibility as well for how am I doing with what I'm doing. Certain jobs are very difficult at times when you're dealing with maybe something that's a mundane routine thing. So creating interest is important. Offering opportunities for people to grow is important. Offering people acknowledgement of what they're doing is important. Helping people recognize that they are valued. That's key from top leadership for sure. Understanding how do we value our employees? How do we show that they're important to us? How do we make sure our team members are functioning well and happy with what they do? That comes down to something we may talk about a little bit more in another episode, which is a culture. The leadership is responsible for setting the tone, for making sure that culture is an open enough culture that people can say, hey, I need a little help here. Or, hey, this is not really going well for me. Or, hey, I'm loving what I'm doing. Can I do more? Or, hey, I'd like another opportunity. What's my career path? You know, we're dealing with people of different generations, and we need to be cognizant of what motivates and lights them on fire. It might not be the same thing for somebody who's in their 50s than for somebody who's in their 30s or in their 20s. So you start to look at what's that range that you're dealing in. And not not everybody's going to respond to the same thing. So not everybody's going to respond to a bonus or a pay raise. Not everybody's going to respond to more time off. Not everybody's going to respond to whatever it is. The other piece of it is helping people understand what's the value that they offer and for them to feel a sense of being appreciated. And that's as simple as smiling when you walk by. That's as simple as saying thank you. It's those little things that really help. And then, ultimately, each individual is responsible for what are they bringing to the table and for being able to say, this is working for me or this isn't working for me. I'd like more, I'd like less, I'd like whatever. It's kind of all of that.
Does the motivation come from, because hearing you say that, if you're a dentist listening to this, a practice owner, I'm sure you're like, okay, that makes me feel maybe takes a little bit of pressure off of me because you talk about each individual professional, the hygienist, the dental assistant, the office manager, taking responsibility themselves in order to be able to be motivated and things like that. What role does the practice owner play?
The practice owner, as in any owner of any business, really sets the tone for how are we going to operate, the how tone. They set the tone for how is it going to feel to people who work in my area? How am I going to connect with them? And being cognizant and aware and willing to adjust and willing to ask, how is it going? Because so many times people are very busy. They're busy doing this, that, or whatever thing. They're going from one patient to the next patient, kind of in the mindset, I've got to get this done, and blocking out other things. There needs to be an ownership of that person or that team of people to saying, we need to pay attention. And how do we pay attention? If I'm not aware of what's happening with my people, I can't adjust to them. So the awareness is, am I asking the right questions? Am I paying attention to what I'm seeing? Am I getting inputs from other people? And once I get them, am I listening with an open mind and listening with an idea that maybe there are things that I can adjust? Or am I listening to defend? And if you're listening to defend, you're going to have a problem. You need to be listening to say, huh, I wonder what we can do about that. I wonder if, now there are some things we can change and some things we can't. So, it may be that somebody says to you, well, I just want to make sure that I don't have to ever work, after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, on occasion, maybe that's not going to happen. And so then it's being able to say, I hear you. I would love to have that happen. And yet I know realistically there will be times when that's not possible. But let's keep talking. So the owner's perspective is they set the tone, they set the culture. They really are the people who have to pay attention to how is this going. And it doesn't happen unless they ask the questions, unless they take the time to do that, and unless they reach out and invite input from their team members.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about accountability and managing expectations. Again, another comparison between an organization like the Green Bay Packers. For those of us that are sports fans, we know that constantly during a football season, there is a lot of news around the individuals, right? The star receiver, the star quarterback, the defensive back, these stars.
Right?
And yet, one of my favorite things is at the end of a year when a team wins a championship and you see the emotion come out of it's very apparent, as you know so well, how hard they all worked and what it took to get there as a team. Can you compare a little bit about, when we talk about accountability and managing expectations, the comparison from what you saw in your work with the Green Bay Packers with the dental practice?
Yes, I think the interesting thing about that is they seem like they wouldn't necessarily fit in the same context, but they really do. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, every team is comprised of individuals that are making contributions in whatever way that they contribute. And when you go back to earlier part of our conversation about helping people understand what is the goal, what are we aiming for? And achieving the goal is really what you're looking for. In a sports team, and the Packers or any other team, it's winning championships. Their goal is winning championships. Each game leads to going to that championship, right? In a dental practice, the goal is what's the outcome for the people that we are serving? Are they happy with what's happening? Does this make them feel better? Are there ways that you hear back from them how they felt about what their experience was? In that case, every person along the way that has touched or in some way been a part of that patient's experience, whether they saw the patient or not, they might be in the accounting area, they might be in the billing area, that they could be invisible literally to that person, but every person along the way is making a contribution that patient satisfaction. And when you can celebrate those times of satisfaction, you should. when there's feedback that comes, or you solicit feedback that says, "What was your experience like?" And they say, "I love the persons who greeted me at the desk. Um, the billings went beautifully. My restoration was fabulous." When you hear those things, those are stories that should be shared. Those are stories that each team should be able to celebrate and be able to celebrate their um, their part in it. So the accountability piece is for me to ask myself in that practice, what is my role today? Of all the things that I'm going to do, what are the things that are really the most important? What's going to lead me toward that patient's ultimate joy and satisfaction when they walk out this door? And that's that a mindset that is a part of accountability. So it's not that I'm going to, be the one that sits at the door says, "I really can't help you with that." Well, if you say I can't help you with that, the question would be, well, who can? Because obviously there's something that they need help with. So it's that one step beyond in accountability that says, if I can't, I'm going to find who can. If I can, I'm going to do the best I can. I want to make sure that at the end of the day, I walk out the door as an employee or a team member that says, I gave it my best today. And it was good.
And then along those lines, let's talk a little bit about managing expectations and how that fits into what you just shared.
Yes, managing expectations is an interesting thing because you have to ask expectations from whom. Okay. So we have expectations of your team members and what are they working with every day. We have expectations of the person that's walking in your door that you're going to serve. And we have expectations of all of the people that are along the way. So you, as a dentist, you have expectations of the people that are supporting you while you are serving that person. So part of your expectation is going to be, do they know what I need? Do they have the product that I need? Is it right there available for me while I need it? And you've got a person here who's in need, the dentist in between, and somebody over here. These expectations need to be clear all the way through. It takes a lot of clarity, it takes communication, and communication is key. On every level, it's key. And it takes that uh, personal responsibility to know if I'm not clear, I need to ask. If I'm not um, available, if I don't have what I need to be able to figure out how can I get it. So that's that expectation. The expectation that the patient or client that comes into your office has every day, every one of those people is coming in expecting that you're going to provide the very best care for them that you can or what they work. And that means, again, communicating. So that person may walk in the door and say, "I want this fixed today." And you absolutely know that that's not possible. The managing expectation at that point is then having clear communication about what's possible, what's the timeline, how do we do that, and making sure that you do that in a way that people can understand and feel that you have heard them and feel that you know that you'd like that. But, it's one of those things we say, well, we expect that the Green Bay Packers are going to win a championship every year. Well, that may be the expectation. It doesn't always happen.
It'd be nice, right?
It'd be nice.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was going to ask you that. Like, in the work that you did with that organization, how do you hear this all the time, teams come into the year. I think about this. I'm like thinking about like day one in the locker room, right? And the leadership going into that saying, well, our goal is to get to a championship. But there's also the reality of maybe where they are, they're in a rebuilding stage or they're in a development stage. How did that organization balance out that desire to, like you mentioned, to want to win that championship, but then also be okay, especially as competitors who wanted to do a good job, like dental teams do with their care? It's at the top of their lists, managing that, the reality of the situation.
Managing the reality is recognizing that things are not always going to go perfectly. And with a sports team, at any point there can be an injury. At any point there can be something that occurs that's going to waylay that team or going to put them on a different trajectory. And then recognizing, okay, when that happens, we need to adjust. And how do we adjust? So we need to make an adjustment here. You'll hear coaches say, we didn't do this well and we need to do better next week. And sometimes they say the same thing every week, right? But at the end of the day, it's that mindset of saying, we take what's real, we deal with what happens, and we make the adjustments, continuing to aim for what we want. And aiming for what we want is to be the very best that we can be given whatever we have to deal with. In a dental practice, it may very much be the same. You aim for always to have the very best outcome for every single person that comes into that practice. Along the way, you may discover there's something that happened here that we didn't anticipate. And knowing that we didn't anticipate that, then we've got to make an adjustment. We make that adjustment and we still aim for the very best outcome we can possibly have. You're always aiming for that. And it might be that the best outcome is a different outcome than what you started with. In a sports game, it might be that your outcome is we did not make the playoffs. We know we're not going to make a championship. We still want to be the very best that we can be this year and beyond. So it's the adjusting your target along the way, but never giving up, wanting to be the very best that you can be no matter what, and wanting that team to be the best that can be no matter what. Because the mindset of we didn't meet the target, so we're just going to give up is not acceptable. It's not acceptable in sports, and it's absolutely not acceptable in any type of dental practice or healthcare or any endeavor that you're doing where you're dealing with people and what that outcome would be like. I think with patients, it's important to understand and have them understand as well that this is what we're aiming for. There might be opportunities or changes along the way. We might find something different than what we expect, but here's what we're aiming for. If we do find something different, we're going to make the adjust. We're going to do what we need to do. And I think that's an important element. And it's important for the dental owners and the dentists themselves to recognize that those adjustments sometimes are difficult for people to accept. And in that process of acceptance, there's almost always resistance to the change because, well, wait a minute, I really want this. This isn't really possible, so maybe we're going to aim for this. And finding ways to navigate toward acceptance. And I think that's the same thing with a sports game. You know, everybody wants to win.
Right.
They start out wanting to win, and they want to win every game, and they want to win every down. You want to win. That's what drives that strong competition. But it's also recognizing that the win might look different than what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
You still can have a win.
Love it. All right. So there has never been a team in the history of the world that hasn't had some sort of conflict, right? So the next thing I wanted to ask you was about conflict. And I think what's interesting about a dental practice, Betsy, is that like we're here at Dental City, and I think about an organization like Dental City that is not, yes, they're talking with dental practices and their customers on a daily basis, but unlike a dental practice where the customer or the patient is actually getting to see that team in action like every day. Like a company like Dental City, like you can manage your conflict resolution and maybe not be seen in the eyes as a customer. In a dental practice, if there's tension and it's a small team, right, and there's conflict that doesn't get resolved, it can be visible. So I'd love to have you talk about that a little bit when we talk about leadership and managing teams and the whole aspect of how you advise or would advise, a dental practice listening to this on conflict resolution.
Conflict is inevitable because we're people, we have different ideas, we have different thoughts. And there are times when just those differences will lead us into a place where, we have strong emotion around something. Um, I want to sort that out into two different places. Conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. People sometimes think it's difficult and it's bad, and it can be hard. But the thing about it is, it leads us to be talking about how we see things differently. So, really, what it means is I'm seeing it one way, you may see it another way. That may be a difference of opinion, and we might be able to get to the middle very easily or not. And if there's a lot of emotion involved, then it becomes that tense situation around, well, I'm right and you're wrong. So the black and white thinking, that's always a problem. Or that you feel so strongly about something that it's hard to put your emotion aside enough to try to walk it through. I think all of us have walked into a situation, maybe an office or someplace where you sense things are tense here, right? It's not an easy thing to walk into that, right? In a practice, it really takes the leadership saying to whomever, whatever is going on there, to say, look, I recognize that we've got some strong emotion around this. We do need to work this through, but let's make sure that we put it aside for now so that we can do what we need to do, that our patients don't experience that, and we set a defined time where we will actually sit down and walk this through. The thing that I say about any type of conflict is the first step is take the emotion out of it if you can. Try to say to yourself, hey, I'm feeling too emotional about this right now. I'm feeling like I'm not going to be able to be clear with what I want to say. So I need to just take a break, take a step away, let things settle down a little bit, and then always come back to it. Because it's taking a break, stepping away, and never coming back to it is worse. You need to get back to it. The resolution does not come by just walking away. The second piece of that is there are times when it's such a big issue that the emotion is difficult to get away. And there might be a time then when you need to bring someone else in that can be helpful in walking that through. It can be helpful in saying, well, wait a minute, I'm hearing this from you. I'm hearing this from you. Sounds like you guys are on the same page, but you're just different ways to get there. So it's looking at who can be helpful in trying to get to a point where you're finding common ground. In any conflict situation, the first thing is look for common ground. So, in a dental practice, common ground is what? It's the care of your patient. It's the ultimate goal, right? That's your common ground. If there's no other common ground, that needs to be some common ground. Second thing is once you've found common ground, you need to look at where are the differences and how big are they? Are they reconcilable or irreconcilable? Is it so big that we're never going to find our way? Or is it big enough, but maybe manageable? Maybe we both need to take some time to look at how do we get there? The ultimate goal is getting to some consensus, and that would be a compromised usual. There are some things that are not compromisable, however. Let's take values. You know, in a dental practice or in any business, or businesses are based on whatever is the basic value that owner has, and there are times when they're not going to compromise on what that value is. So that would be an irreconcilable one if you can't get there. But it's always worth the conversation. It's always worth taking the emotion out of it, and it's always worth asking yourself, asking myself when I enter that, what is my part in getting to resolution? Not what's their part, not what do they need to do. What do I need to do? And taking it from that standpoint to say, am I seeing all the pieces of this? Am I actually missing something? Or asking the owner or the person that's in that ultimate leadership role, what else are you seeing that I might not be seeing? And the leader doing the same. What are you seeing that I might not be seeing? That's the essence of that conversation. It's a back and forth conversation. And it goes back to that whole notion of trust. Because if you trust that you can have that kind of conversation, almost all conflict can be resolved. Very seldom does it come to a real irreconcilable difference. Takes a commitment. It takes a willingness to be vulnerable. Takes a willingness to see things that you might not want to look at. It takes a willingness to say, I need to voice this because it's a big concern for me.
Well, and I like how this all is connected because hearing you talk about that, I'm thinking back of the first part of this conversation where you were talking about the vision and the goal for the practice ultimately.
Right.
I feel like that with trust and with clarity on that, there's going to be conflict.
Mhm.
I feel like that it's never always super easy, but it's a little bit easier if we all know that we're kind of rowing in the same direction to take the time to work through that conflict. And I love the idea, because I think it's so important. You got to take the emotion out of it. Because as I'm hearing you talk about a lot of these things on how to manage conflict
Right.
and come up with a resolution, the emotion does not help it.
It
So
doesn't.
that really feels to me like priority number one.
Yes, and part of it is, people are passionate about what they do. So there's passion and emotion in what we do, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And also, conflict is a really good thing because in conflict, you often come out with some of the best ideas that you wouldn't have come out with if everything's just running just super smooth and it's all fine and it's, business as usual. Many times there are great things that will come out of resolving a conflict and a different practice or a different strategy that you might not have thought of if that didn't show up. It's healthy to have differences, and it's healthy to walk them through. It's not healthy to bury those and just put your head in the sand and say, just keep doing your job. That doesn't work. It creates dissonance for people, and it creates that sense of, gosh, my voice doesn't count. People want their voices to get heard.
Like the left tackle, right? He's like, I'm not a quarterback. I'm not the star wide receiver.
Right.
But if I'm not doing my job and I don't feel comfortable that I can say, what I hear, what I see, uh, good luck getting to that offense.
All right. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's a very good example too, because everyone plays their part, and it might not be a real visible part.
Right.
It might not be. It's just like I was saying. Some of your business people in an office may not be the ones that are actually having that direct contact with that particular patient coming in. But when there's something that's going on with the billing situation, people get very, very, distressed over those kinds of issues. And you rely on those folks to do the best that they can do, also contributing to that person's satisfaction and to the ultimate vision that patient has of your entire team. I'm sure this has happened to you, John. You've walked into a situation where, there've been some conflict going. You feel that just that kind of edginess, and the whole time you can't relax because you feel like something's not quite right. We have that sixth sense about us. We know when we walk into a place, whether that is a place that is, well functioning, and people are happy there, and people are doing what they want to do. You can feel that. And as customers, which all of our patients are, of course, as customers, we get to decide, do I want to walk into that practice or not? Do I want to walk into that grocery store or not? Do I want to walk? Because I get to choose where I go. Right. And end of the day, I'm going to choose a place that feels good to me, that I feel like I'm valued too as a person walking in that door.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right. The last thing with this episode is I'd love to have you talk a little bit about empowering the hygienist in the practice to perform at the highest level of their licensure. And I'm curious on your thoughts on this because, again, when I think about a successful dental practice, for those of us that have been in dentistry for a long time, we know how crucial and important a strong, healthy hygiene program is. And in so many cases, that is led by the hygienist. And, I have worked and talked and had so many conversations with hygienists over the years. They play such an important role in the dental practice. I mean, when I think of my experience as a patient over the years, so often, yes, I think about the dentist that I went to, but I also think about the hygienist. So as we kind of wrap this first episode on leadership and all of that, I'd love to kind of have you talk a little bit about empowering the hygienist to really perform at that high level.
The hygienist is the person who, in general, has the longest time period contact with that patient. And that time frame is part of what builds the whole experience of that patient coming in. And the hygienist at that point, to me, is the person who welcomes you into this space. They tell you what's happening. They give you the game plan for the time that you're there. They're teaching you all the way through about what you need to know as a patient, right? That hygienist is in a powerful position, probably the most powerful position in the practice.
Yeah, I agree.
Because their time with the person, their exposure to that person, their influence is enormous. And I don't know that they recognize how enormous that influence is, both in that experience that the patient has, in the patient's overall health, and telling them what they're seeing and what's happening, and in setting the tone for when that dentist walks in and spends the 5 minutes that they might have with that person, right?
Yeah.
So the relationship often is really with the hygienist as much or more so than it is with the dentist. And from that standpoint, I'm not sure that hygienists own that. I think they need to own that more. I think they need to have this sense that, this is my patient who I've got a great opportunity to have a really strong relationship with, to build trust with, to be able to understand what they're experiencing at that moment, and to know that of all the people in the practice, they're the ones that when the person walks out the door, they're going to remember the most. They've had the most time, they have the most influence, they have an awful lot to offer, and they need to do it. They need to seek, they need to relate, they need to use their influence at that time to help that person understand what what they can do, how they can take ownership of their own oral health and ownership of what they're going to do next. And I think that, many times hygienists are viewed as sort of ancillary to the dentist, but they're actually very primary in that practice. And when you had the experiences being with a hygienist who he owns that, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. And you walk out as a patient, and I have many times walked out as a patient and thought, wow, that dentist really needs to keep that person. She's awesome. She's amazing. Or he's amazing. All right.
Yeah.
And that may be the reason that you go back.
Yeah.
And many times it is. Because how many times do we go in and we're getting preventative care? We may not need a thing from the dentist other than just the, checkbox or whatever, that it's all looking good. But that hygienist is the one who's saying to you, you did a great job with that. You got a little spot over here. We need, teaching you and pay attention to you as a person. Because it's that personal touch that makes all the difference for all of us.
Any hygienist that is listening to this is hopefully cheering right now.
I hope.
And I know we're not going to get into this in this episode, but I would love for you on our future episodes to talk a little bit about, or maybe a dental practice out there or a dentist or a practice owner. I mean, it is what it is. I've experienced this where maybe sometimes those hygienists do not feel like they're getting the support that you just laid out, that they should in regards to their role in practice. So I know we'll get into that in future episodes.
You know what I would just like to say for any dentist listening to this, if they are not really, really supporting and paying attention to and acknowledging the role that their hygienists are playing, they need to have a really good look. And they need to actually pay attention. It's so crucial. That's their practice.
Betsy, this has been awesome.
It's
And
been
I'm
great.
so excited to kick this off again. I know this was the vision of the Dental City team to add this value, right? As we kick off 2026, and you mentioned it at the onset, there are definitely some different challenges that dental practices are facing, and that's the whole idea of spending this time with you and having you share your insight. We're going to continue to share the Green Bay Packer stories. I love those comparisons to how a dental practice can perform really well. So thank you for this first episode, and we want to let everybody know, if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, would love to have you subscribe to the podcast. And like always, if you're watching this on YouTube, would also love to have you subscribe as well, so that as we continue to put these episodes together, you'll be able to listen to it like on your favorite listening device. If you're listening to this on your way to the practice or at lunch, or of course, as you like to watch video, you can watch it on YouTube as well. So Betsy, thanks for this episode, and I'm excited for the next.
Thank you so much, Brad. It was fun. I'm excited too.
I love it. Thanks, everybody.